sound real important. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I did have to weather the storm and a long layover, but I'm very, very pleased to be here with you today. To be talking about bridging gaps through the development of non-traditional partnerships, a case of a predominantly white institution and a historically Black university. Well, before I go into all of what this is, let's just talk about a little background. I'm an educator by trade. This is my 27th year. I started early. 25 years in the system. I've been a K-12 administrator, teacher, and then into higher ed. I've been administrator in higher ed when I was the director of teacher education, but always in my department of ed leadership, where now I train principals, those that want to be principals. So let's talk about, before we move on, what's a predominantly white institution? Usually it's called a PWI, which is predominantly white institution. But then you have your historically Black universities, but they're usually called HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. So let's just, anybody know what HBCUs, why we have them? Why don't we just have all PWIs? Why do we have HBCUs?
Were they established by some act of Congress, like funded, the HBCUs? Were they funded by?
It's an interesting thought.
Or not.
Anybody else?
Were they founded in response to segregation?
Interesting thought. Anybody else? It's a little combination of the two. They did give a little funding. More so because once segregation, right after the Civil War, slavery ended, and segregation became big, which was already big, but at a different level in the South. There were African Americans who wanted to go on to higher ed. Well, guess what? Because if you look like me, I couldn't go to school with someone that looked like you. So they developed HBCUs that are known as historical Black colleges and universities, because those were the only institutions of higher ed that people of color could go to. So just a little tidbit of information. So I have the privilege and I feel the honor of having a degree from 2 HBCUs, but I also have a degree from a PWI as well. So I have the best of both worlds, so I can see them from a different perspective. So I work at an HBCU, but I've also worked as an administrator in a predominantly white K-12 settings, where I was one teacher of many that looked like me, or an administrator where there were only 3 teachers that looked like me in K-12 to go on to work at an HBCU. So when the opportunity came for Jackson State to work with the University of Vermont, we received an email in the middle of the pandemic from, I think it was Julia. I can't remember. And I read this and I said, what is this about? And let me explain to you, it's going to be on another slide. Usually a lot of funding institutions are in, they want you to have some form of diversity. They wanted you to cover it to make sure things are equitable. Because that sounds really nice, doesn't it? Oh, it's diverse. Oh, it's equitable. Most of the time, all they want to do is to say, yeah, we have that on there, and that's it. It's box check. So when we were first approached, myself and my other 2 colleagues, that's Dr. Jacqueline Jackson and Dr. Deidre Wheaton. Deidre and I are in the College of Ed, and Dr. Jackson is from computer science. We were skeptical, to be honest, because we were so accustomed to people wanting to use our credentials but not utilize our knowledge. So they can tell you, we were like, okay, let's just hear what they have to say. We'll see if it's more of the same, you know. It was the attitude of, well, we'll throw them a few dollars just to appease them so that we can get all these millions of dollars because we will have checked the box. Unfortunately, we see that more often than not. So, but we were very pleased that this was not like that. We got to know each other, and as time went on, we went through dialogues of these things. So, how to build a partnership between the PWI and the HBCU. These were some of the questions that we discussed and some of the things that we talked about. Every project has to have a vision and a goal, correct? Everything. I'm sorry, standing in my spot is really driving. We talked about what are our shared goals and outcomes. What do we both want from this? Obviously, on our end, we wanted to what? Not be used, but to be utilized. How can each institution benefit from it? How can the partnerships contribute on both sides? We deeply talked about these things. Cultural understanding and sensitivity. I remember so many of the aha moments with Julia. She can tell you when we just started talking about simple things when it came to the South, meaning the southern part of the United States, to how things operate at an HBCU. And just so I can give a little shout out to my HBCU that I work at, Jackson State University. I also have a degree from there. Jackson State is well known in certain arenas around the nation. If anybody, let me ask you, who watched the Super Bowl? Anybody watch the Super Bowl? Anybody see the halftime show? The band that performed with Usher? Jackson State. Yes, so we're well known. We have all kinds of athletes that play pro ball, a lot of different things, but still, even in the academic arena, we were still utilized, not utilized, we were more used in so many different areas. So we talked about how can a partnership ensure understanding the respect of each institution's unique history and culture and mission. So then the question came, what is that unique history of Jackson State? Well, Jackson State started in 1877 in Natchez, Mississippi. It wasn't even in Jackson at the time. And started out as a seminary, a religious college. It moved from Natchez to Jackson in like 1878, 79, something like that, to the city of Jackson. And it took on the name Jackson College. Yes, Jackson, Mississippi was named after Andrew Jackson. That's a whole nother story. Okay. It went on from being Jackson College to being Jackson State College to being Jackson State University. My grandmother attended Jackson State when it was Jackson College. My mother and her siblings attended Jackson State University. So yeah, it's a family thing, other cousins and uncles and aunts. So I'm the 4th generation teacher to come through the teacher college at Jackson State University. So we have a unique history as an institution at Jackson State, but that same uniqueness is at pretty much every HBCU. And the premise of all of them are a lot the same. We talked about the culture. We were, I think we had a discussion one time about what there were things, we try not to talk too much about politics, and I don't really want to get off into that now, but we did have to touch on different things when it came to the work that we were doing, and how things were perceived where we were, opposed to where here, they're totally different. What steps can be taken to avoid perpetuating inequalities and reinforcing power imbalances between the institutions? We talked about all of that. Our funding, because we are a public institution, and your funding as a public institution is wildly different, I'm sure. Not only because you're in a different state. If all of the public institutions in the state of Mississippi, is 3 HBCUs, were to compare to the PWIs that are public institutions in the state of Mississippi. The PWI's funding is up here. The HBCU funding is down here. As a tenured faculty member at Jackson State University, I'm there because I want to make a difference. I'm there because of my family legacy. I'm there because I understand the importance that if these institutions had not been in place, then there were people like my grandmother who would have never been able to get where she is, where she was. It's passed on now. So I work there. It's not for the money. Trust me, it's not for the money. I make less than I did as a principal, being a tenured faculty member at an HBCU. It's there because I love what I do. How will both institutions create space for open dialogue about racial? It's a lot different in the South than up here. Cultural and historical differences. What measures will ensure that both institutions have equal say and influence over critical decisions? We talked extensively about different things. Equity and inclusion. What steps will ensure that HBCU faculty and students are not marginalized in the partnership? That was big. That was big. And how will both institutions promote diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the partnership? And then we moved on, because what was the purpose of a partnership if you're not going to, if you stay within the walls of each one of the institutions and it doesn't flow out into the community, what good does it do? So then we talked about how will this partnership engage with the broader community? How can both institutions work together to address local and national social justice issues? And how can both institutions create space for open dialogue about racial, cultural, and historical differences? So we started with those things in mind, but one of our first conversations was about, what are you passionate about? Just as a person. Then we talked about, why are you passionate about that? All the while, one of the things that we were doing, which I would say is one of the most important things that you can do if you're trying to build a partnership between these two types of entities, we started to get to know each other. And we built relationships. So then we could talk about, why are we passionate about equity, diversity, education, and outreach? Then we could go on and talk about, why are we passionate about it when it comes to critical zone science? And I must tell you, I had no clue what critical zone science was. None. And I told them, I said, can I raise my hand? They said, sure. What is that? What does that mean? And so they explained it. And I must say, I have learned a lot. Don't ask me to explain it to you. So this was our driving question, and it continues to be our driving question. Why do equity and diversity matter in constructing strong, collaborative, interdisciplinary science education and outreach programs? We want to put more students of color in science education because it's a need. There's an imbalance there. When we start talking about diversity, not just racial, we want to put more women in science and education. My daughter is 14. She loves math. She's okay with science. Why don't you like science? Okay, well, as long as you have, you make names. So, we learned about the critical zone science. But this is what I was talking about. Initially, JSU faculty entered into conversations with them. We were skeptical. We had to overcome all of that baggage that we were coming into it with. You know, for those people that are married, you know, hopefully you married your high school sweetheart, and, you know, but if you didn't, I hope you didn't go into your new relationship with baggage from the old relationship, because then it will mess up the new relationship, right? So, same thing. We had to drop the baggage of being used, misused, abused, all of that in order to open up our minds to what we were getting ready to do. And it was, okay, I'm gonna try this, but you know, the walls were up. We were really protective of ourselves because we did not know exactly what this was going to look like. This is how it started. Some of it, just to give you a little glimpse of how things, that's when I had hair. And then we started looking at this. We moved from having, there were sessions when we would just talk about what's going on with you. Because where I live, we have a lot of different forms of storms, from tornadoes to hurricanes to, I can experience all 4 seasons in one day. I wake up in the morning, it's cold. By midday, it may feel like spring. Early afternoon, it's fall. And then nighttime, it's all over winter. You know, I can have all the seasons in one day, in a 24-hour span. So that being said, we talked about all of these different things. We talked about what's going on with you as a person, what's going on with you at your institution, what's going on with you in your city. Jackson State is in the capital city of Mississippi. There was a lot of things that was going on in the news in Jackson, from crime to water issues to less than smart legislature making these decisions that I'm very, very questionable. I had to remember I'm on camera. But we talked about all of these different things. We talked about things that were going on with you guys. I remember when the flooding happened here, and we were really concerned about how you guys are doing. You know, we built relationships. And these are my other colleagues. This is Jackie, and that's Deidre. Let's see. We went on after our discussions. We talked about, well, what can we do? Then we talked about a way to do how can we get critical zone science to teacher candidates, ultimately get it to children, correct? Because we want them to understand it. So we moved into developing a virtual teacher academy to bridge the gap between elementary school and middle school. Remember, all of this was happening at the beginning of the pandemic, or in the middle of the pandemic. My daughter at the time was in 5th grade. She was getting ready to go into 6th grade. And I was noticing what she was learning in science, because my very first year of teaching, I taught 9th grade biology. So I'm noticing what she's learning in 5th grade, and then I'm looking at the curriculum for what she has to know when she gets to 6th grade. And guess what? It didn't align at all. So you're assuming that these children are going to know this in 6th grade, but you haven't taught them this in 5th grade. Mm-hmm. So that's when we started this way of how can we bridge this gap? And we came up with developing the virtual teacher academy. So this is what it looked like. We had modules. Remember, this was during the pandemic. That we recruited teachers, and they came on board and they did the modules. They wanted to learn from different districts around the state. They went on to do projects with their students for the things that was taught during the modules. UVM faculty presented the modules to our teachers. At the end of the academy, they actually came to Vermont. We sent a group to Vermont to put in action what they were learning, and then to take it back to their classrooms. So we polled them to see how they did with going through the teacher academy, because nothing you do without any type of data is what? It's null and void. Because you have to have data to know, did it work? It didn't work. What are you doing? So this is what we learned. And we talked to the teachers. We talked to them about, well, what do we need to do to further this research, to further this collaboration, to go further than this? And they gave us different things. So at the time that all this was going on, this was also at the height of when things shut down in Jackson, Mississippi. I live outside of Jackson in the suburbs, so I wasn't affected by it. But many people that I go to church with, there were friends of mine that did live in the city that were affected by it. It was bad. People went without running water for days, where the city had to literally give them water. Or if they had water, it looked like that. This is a picture of people being given water. The local churches were giving out water like this. My church was one of them that we just gave out water. My sons were, I think one was a senior and the other one was like a freshman in high school. So they were out there with my husband and the other men in the congregation carrying cases of water to people to make sure that they could have drinking water. But what we forget about when it comes to water is not just your drinking water. How do you take a bath? How do you brush your teeth? How do you cook? How do you wash your clothes? Simple things that we take for granted. You know, all of that was going on. So the teacher said, these are great, but let's talk about something that's a little bit closer to home that we can address. And this is what they wanted to address. So I love this. This is something Julia shared with me, and how we utilize this in regards to going from the teacher academy into our next step. Our values, what will we do, how will we do it, who will we do it with, and then we turn it into next project. What it taught us was, we went on to have, and this is just a slide from after the academy, we started holding listening sessions or community voice sessions. We invited the teachers back. We invited community leaders. We invited people that work in the science areas with water, a collaboration of people to come and let's talk about how we can address this. We invited, Jackson, Mississippi has one main school district, public district, and it's Jackson Public Schools. We invited personnel from the public school system to come in, and they came in to just talk about, because not only did the water affect individuals in their own homes, the schools had to close. So all of those children went to virtual learning because they couldn't go to school, you couldn't flush the toilets, you couldn't have anything to drink, you couldn't cook, so they had to stay home. So in the community voices, this was our goal. And our community voices people were very, very vocal about different things. We asked these type of questions. The second one was the one that really, really stood out. As we discussed these things with them, we talked about this. In the middle of us working on this next step with water, this came out. So we went on, continuing with the listening sessions. We talked about what resources around water education can be that we can utilize and move to the next step. And these were the next steps. So we brought the teachers back and we thought, okay, we're going to address water and its understanding of how it works and how it affects people. The teachers in K-12 were understanding of that. But then we thought about, what about those teacher candidates that are going to go out into this particular school district? Because Jackson State has a partnership with Jackson Public Schools. So most of our teacher candidates feed into Jackson Public Schools. So they're going to be exposed to all of these different challenges that the teachers there already have. So how do we prepare them for that? Well, we had a course. Yeah, it was housed in the science department. It was optional for the students to take and all of that. And I remember as the director of teacher ed, I said, this can't be optional. It really needs to be changed. It took a while. This course was redesigned the spring of this year. This course was offered this past summer. And this is what it did. We had, from the Mississippi Department of Education, the science coordinator worked on this project. We had a professor from the science department, biology department to work on this project. We had teachers to work on this project. And then of course, all of us worked on this project to get this course redesigned for our teacher candidates. And now it's not optional, it's a course that they must take. So we went back to our community voices and said, so what more can we do? So we're at that stage now. What more can we do? Back to our question, because this is our foundation of what are we doing and why we're doing it. So we've gone from developing a virtual teacher academy, because it was in the middle of the pandemic, to addressing how to address an issue within the community. Still working on that, to redesign a course for our teacher candidates so that they can get the fundamental and foundational information they need when they go out to teach science, so that some of those gaps that are there won't be there anymore. I would go into classrooms as the director of teacher ed, and they're teaching a science class. And most of the times the students will be doing worksheets in elementary school instead of science experiments or really talking about science, which would infuriate me, because how are they learning something from a worksheet? Really? So we're still a work in progress, but we are working towards it. I will tell you this. Over the course of these few years that I've been working with the professors here at the University of Vermont, I have grown as a person and I have grown as a professor. First, it helped me to open my mind to the possibilities that HBCUs can literally work with PWIs truly. Second, I learned what critical zones are. And how it affects so many different parts of your life and your world. And now, because of this course that's been redesigned with our collaboration, we will reach the lives of so many children because of it. And ultimately, as an educator by heart, our goal, my goal is always, how is this going to better the babies that are under us? How are they going to grow? How is this going to impact them? Because if it's not impactful for them, is it even important?